Thank you, Mr. Chair. In 2000, the CCP issued a white paper that said it, quote, does not station any troops or set up any military bases in any foreign country, close quote. Well, the CCP cannot make that claim anymore. Today, it has a military base in Africa, a base, as you can see here, in, of all places, Argentina, and they have a suspected base in Cuba, that red star up there. It's also now building deep water ports across Latin America and the Caribbean through the BRI. And as you can see on that map, it covers the entire region. Dr. Parks, your organization recently did a study where you argued that the CCP might try to use some of these ports as military bases. Isn't that right? And Mr. Rundi, we can't even compete in terms of developing deep water ports in most of those countries because we can only, the DFC, for instance, can only lend in 4 of them, right?
That's correct, Ranking Member. We can't fight something with nothing.
Well, we got nothing in a lot of these countries. Well, let's take a specific example, Panama Canal. As we can see on this map, the canal shortens the distance to go between the east and west ports of America by 3 weeks because it takes 3 more weeks to go around South America as opposed to going through the canal. Mr. Rundi, although Panama has the operating rights to the canal itself, it's given PRC companies managing rights for these 2 ports on either side of the Panama Canal. Isn't that right?
That's correct, Ranking Member Krishnamoorthi.
And in a potential conflict over Taiwan, for instance, the CCP could use its control of these entry ports to potentially delay American civilian and military shipping. Isn't that right?
Ranking Member Krishnamoorthi, I share your concern. I would say that in our treaty with the government of Panama controls the entire canal, but I would say, sir, that and that we have as part of our treaty commitments that we're on the hook for defending Panama if there.
And so that could be where a conflict arises, because they control those entry points, and they could decide to delay shipping in the event of conflict.
In an ideal world, we would ultimately see that when those contracts end, which will be over the next 10 or 15 years, a chance to get those Hong Kong controlled companies out of managing those ports, sir.
Yes, sir. Let me turn to another topic, and that is the BRI saddling countries with massive debt, and it's having real impacts on real people. Take Kenya, for example. The PRC accounts for almost 3/4 of its bilateral debt, and this debt has even led to deadly unrest. In 2023, 6 people died during protests, and you can see the unrest in this picture here in Kenya. And these protests were against a proposed tax hike to pay back the debt to the PRC. Dr. Parks, this type of debt burden from the BRI, the Chinese BRI, is fueling social unrest in Kenya and in other BRI countries, right?
With respect to the tax hike issue, it is true that the Ruto administration in Kenya has increased taxes. It's also cut food and fuel subsidies to avoid defaulting on its repayment obligations to the Chinese and non-Chinese creditors. And yes, it is also true that these measures are deeply unpopular with Kenyan citizens.
And let's see what all this debt is for. Let me turn your attention to my final topic, which is policy alternatives. In Angola, there's a train network. Angola contracted with Chinese companies to rehabilitate its railways, but a year later, a Chinese maintenance train collided with a freight train, killing 18 people. There's a picture of that pileup. In fact, after 10 derailments per year, Angola said enough is enough, and so they no longer wanted China to run the railways. They turned to us. And actually, there's this corridor called the Lobito Corridor, which gives the world access to critical minerals from the Congo. The Congo's here, and this rail network goes to the coast through Angola. Now, Mr. Rundi, after the Angolans rejected the Chinese, they turned to the DFC to help to develop the Lobito corridor, correct?
That's correct, Ranking Member.
Now tell us a little more, expand a little more, what more needs to be done to help make sure the DFC can offer this type of development to more parts of the world?
So thank you, Ranking Member, for that question. I think a couple of things. One is I think that there'll be an opportunity with the reauthorization to look at some of the things I mentioned earlier. There's also a much more wonky issue which has to do with something called equity authority, which allows the DFC to make specific kinds of more flexible investments, and the way in which we score equity according to sort of the rules of a variety of rules of the government, it makes it very difficult for that to happen. I won't get into the reasons for that here, but looking at this issue of equity authority is an important thing to review. I also think that if I look at the libido corridor, I think the Biden administration has done a good thing by saying we need to bring all of our partners together. So this is a G7 initiative called the PGII. It's a mouthful, but the libido corridor is sort of the first example of saying how can we all, our friends, work together to try and develop infrastructure across the libido corridor. In my world, I'd love to see us, Ranking Member, have sort of 10 or 15 libido corridors. So one of the things we need to think about is having the ability to a little bit more flexibility with the DFC, but we also need to be able to work better with our partners. We can't do this all alone as the DFC. We should be able to be more joined up with, say, the Japanese and with the Brits and with the Australians and with the Canadians. They all want to work with us. This conversation that we're having is being had in Tokyo, in Ottawa, in London, in Canberra. So we're pushing on an open door. So I think working in partnership is an important part of this, Ranking Member.
Great, thank you.